Hi everyone, it's Jessica and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about the first 52 books I've read for the first quarter of 2021. 52 books is a lot of books for me to read in 3 months, especially where the page length averages around 250 to 300 pages a book. They weren't short, but my anxiety has continued to be high. I've had a lot of trouble writing, and I've also had trouble sleeping. So some of the things I've been doing to fill my time include knitting this lovely blanket and reading. Because I've spent so much time reading, I've managed a whole 52 books already, which is 2 books over my goal for the year. And with so many books under my belt, I thought it would be good for me to give an early list of recommendations of a couple books that really surprised me. Now, all of these books are going to be found on Kindle Unlimited. Of these 52 books, I found about 8 that are worth recommending. The books I mention here are in no particular order. I just scrolled through my Goodreads feed and clicked, yeah, that's one that has a high rating or that I really enjoyed, and wrote down on this paper. So one is not better than the other. This isn't a ranked list. It's just a list of about 8 books that I really enjoyed reading this first quarter. The first one is going to be Glint by Raven Kenndey. For those of you following along on my channel, you might have seen the first book in this series, Guild by Raven Kenndey, made it to that top 10 list. And I was kind of on the fence about the first book. The ending was so good. I knew I was going to read the second book, and I had a feeling that the whole series was going to turn around and become a beloved series of mine. And the second book delivered. So Glint, as the second book in this series, is excellent. It picks up with some of the mysteries that we had from the first book and starts to develop those mysteries more. And now that we're away from Midas, I don't have to have those conflicting feelings about whether or not I like him, whether or not I agree with how the protagonist feels about him. I can just sort of acknowledge that was the way that she felt and move on with my life. And in fact, during this book, she starts to question some of her natural relationship with him. And we get more flashbacks of her and Midas together, so we can begin to see where she might be coming from, what other things that she lived through that might have brought her to a place where she feels that Midas is a savior and her true love. And she starts to feel conflicted about her loyalty to Midas. As we had noticed in the first book, it's been a long time since Midas has treated her well. And now she's in with the enemy, and this enemy soldier and his lieutenants seem to treat her with a lot of respect and consideration. Meanwhile, the other people in her kingdom, the other saddles she's with, continue to be antagonistic. I was a little disappointed with the level of antagonism that happened in the book between her and the saddles. I was hoping that other people besides the enemy would start to see her worth, would start to see that she is compassionate and caring, that she's doing her best to look out for them, and would be on her side in the future. And that way she could start to make friends. We could have sort of a girl bonding moment. I don't like this trend that I see in a lot of books where if there's more than one woman in the book, they have to be enemies or they have to not get along. One has to resent the other. And I am conflicted about why the one female character, Saddle, seems to hate the other so much. I mean, she did save her from a brutal attack, and she's been trying to be friendly to her this whole time. I can't quite decipher if it's a survival thing, or if she's just used to it, or if she's just decided that this antagonistic relationship she has with our main character is better for her than being friends. It's hard to say. Either way, I had a hard time figuring out what the motivation was for her to not be friendly and for her not to try and build alliances where she could. But other than that, especially the end of Glint was deeply satisfying. It wasn't a surprise, but if you had read the first book and then you're going into the second book, there's this confrontation that's building. And you as the reader, depending on what kind of knowledge you bring to the book, probably have an idea of where that conflict is going. I had this idea in my head of how the conflict was going to play out, and it was really satisfying because what I thought should happen is pretty much what did happen in the prose, and it left me really excited to see where we go from here. And I'm incredibly excited for the third book in this series. So Glint by Raven Kenndey, you'll have to read the first book previously, it is a slow burn and it is a little frustrating in the first book, but I promise you, this second book takes it to the next level and it's worth your time. The next books on my list are actually from my February Black Author Readathon, and they're going to be Deathly Touch by C.C. Solomon and the Fae Academy series by Brittni Chenelle. And you can see more about all of these books in my February vlog readathon. Let's just say that I was extremely happy that I spent this time trying to diversify my reading. These books were definitely some of the best ones I read. And even though I haven't found something else from Brittni Chenelle that I'm interested in reading right now, C.C. Solomon has a huge series that I'm really interested in, and I think is going to keep me reading and keep me moving forward for the rest of the year. And both of these authors are very underread for the quality they're putting out. They're both available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm actually pretty perplexed. I don't understand why they haven't been picked up yet and why they're not larger in our community. So the Fae Academy series by Brittni Chenelle, it's a young adult series. It features a main character who's determined to get into the Fae Academy. Her parents have both died tragically. The Fae Academy trains students with special abilities / magic to be defenders of the city, and she really wants to honor her parents' memory by becoming one of these defenders of the city and helping people who are like her, who are powerless. And of course, she develops these powers and is able to get into the Fae Academy. And once she gets into the academy, she sees that there's more complex dynamics going on than what the media would have led you to believe. Even though the book uses terms like magic and Fae, which in this case is a position and not a magical creature, I did find overall the series is more like a mutant story than it is a magic story. All of the magics that are happening are so different. There's not a specific system they use. There doesn't seem to be rhyme or reason. It's more like a collection of powers or mutations that have happened genetically that allow people to do extraordinary things. But even then, it reminded me a little bit of X-Men Evolution or the Hero Academy anime. It's like a younger, more inviting style, obviously since it's meant for young adults. The main character here is really pure of intention, and that brings a certain joy and levity to the overall story. She has this strong will and determination. The power that she develops seems to suit her very well, and it doesn't feel out of the blue. And even though she's used often as like a special, almost chosen one style, it's clear that she sort of fell into this role, that she's trying to live up to this chosen one situation that's been thrown on her. I will say the third book is far weaker than the first two books, and you could read the first two books and be satisfied without ever reading the third book. The third book is still good. It takes place 7 years later, though, and the time jump put everyone mentally in a different space, mentally and emotionally in a different space. They're not teens anymore. They're adults. They've been living in this world, fighting in this world. I guess things have changed in a way that I wasn't prepared to reconcile, and they responded to it in ways that were difficult for me to balance. I felt like the characters were muddied a little bit, and that some of that pure meaning or straightforward single-minded purpose was gone for them. And I also thought that there was a lot of like adult bitterness and regret, the kind of stuff that you see in some of Stephen King's characters, which none of that was bad. It just wasn't what the series had been like for the first two books. And because of this, I wasn't really expecting it. I had a hard time wrapping my head around where this single-minded, straightforward girl had gone and how she'd become this adult. And two, for me, it was sort of sad because I find, even though Stephen King's characters are interesting to read, I find like they're all pretty sad people. I don't like that mix. I don't want people to feel that way. And I wanted things for this girl that just I could see hadn't panned out. And that made me sad, and it made the book a little bit bittersweet. It does have a great ending. It is worth reading. I guess it just depends on where you are mentally and if you're ready for that kind of ending to be more complicated. and nuanced from the single, more clear goal of the first two books. And of course, Deathly Touch is about a girl who gains magic during the apocalypse, that anything she touches, whether it's human, plant, or animal, dies. And because of this, people don't want to take her into their society. She's really dangerous. But they do take her in because her sister has healing abilities. And she finds out that this vampire guy, she can touch him. And she's in that teenage time where she's been touch-starved the whole time. And she starts to develop romantic feelings for him. There's a larger plot going on that she's forced into, and this vampire who also begins to get feelings for her is forced into. But it's more relationship driven. The larger narrative helps to drive the relationship, and it's like a very sweet, wonderful relationship. It's again intended for young adults. And as I said in the February vlog, and I'll re-emphasize here, I think their relationship is everything I'd want to communicate to teens about how a relationship should exist. Consent, the level of innocence, the fact that you might feel more for someone but still keep things at a certain level, just so everyone is comfortable and so that things move at a pace that people are mentally ready for. All of that's really interesting. Also, the lack of shame around people's feelings and desires is nice in the book. The fact that these teens acknowledge that they have both emotional and physical desire for each other, and that they're open about it. I like all those things. It encourages communication in relationships, and it encourages people to think not only about what they want in a relationship, but about what their partner might want. So all of that I found really healthy and appreciated, specifically in a teen romance. I like in my adult romances too, but where people are often exploring relationships for the first time, I think more care needs to be put into how relationships are presented to teens than maybe an adult counterpart. And of course, there's lots of other things going on too. So teens are taking in these messages while they're looking at the larger story. They may not even be thinking about it the way I was thinking about it. They might be thinking about, well, who is the traitor in this story? Or what is she going to do about this situation coming up? I don't want to spoil too much of the plot. It's really a fun story though, and it gives this character who had been ignored and sort of pushed to the side a chance to shine and become important not only in her community but in other surrounding communities. Next on my list is going to be Dark Horse by Carpenter and Auralia James. Dark Horse is a series about a woman who died in the 1920s and in the afterlife decided to pick the occupation of becoming a demon. And she reforms souls who've done bad things in hell through various forms of torture before she puts their souls back into the ether so that they can try again in Earth. And she's really good at it. She has the highest success rate in hell. And because of this, she gets called in to do a special mission where the powers that be have found out that there's a group of three men, three supernatural men. One's a werewolf, one's a vampire, and one's a fae. And they're going to destroy the world, which is bad for the afterlife because if the whole world is destroyed, there'll be no more ability to reform. There'll be too many souls coming in all at once. It's going to be a mess. And at first, she's really reluctant to do this. They have a dedicated group of people who are supposed to take care of it. The angels are supposed to be involved in Earth, and she's just supposed to stick around to do the torturing of the souls that have been bad. They convince her to do it because if she does this job and succeeds, then she can retire, which is what she's been working towards this whole time, is getting anything she wants in the afterlife. So she goes down to Earth to meet these souls, and right away she finds out that she's actually a mate to one of them, and eventually we find out she's mate to all three. So it is a reverse harem story. And our main protagonist doesn't really want anything to do with it. She's really only concerned about keeping the world from being destroyed and getting to her afterlife. And it's a very fun story. We have sort of like this pulpy, noir, badass chick here not wanting to take any shit and just wanting what she wants. She's not saving the world out of goodness. She's doing it because of what her reward would be for in the end. She's been burned before romantically in her first life. Things didn't work out well, so she's not really interested in this mate scenario. She's very resistant to it, where the men are kind of like, I can't resist this pull. She's like, well, I don't think it's that strong, and that's not really what I'm here to do. And, she's able to keep a lot of her own personal mystery from them and slowly tell her story, slow burn things. Overall, she's the most powerful person and she's in charge. So I liked that. I liked that they didn't change what her goals or ambitions were. The circumstances continued to develop, and even though she started to have feelings for these men, even though she started caring for them, she still was like, saving the world comes first, and I'm here to do a job. And I like all of those elements. I like the fact that we were able to put a woman in that kind of role. I've seen the story done, not a reverse harem specifically, but I've seen the I'm here to save the world at all costs kind of story done with men as the protagonists all the time. It was just nice to see a woman in that role. It was nice to have that feminine touch, but still allow her to swear, still allow her to be frustrated and be angry, and to project things that she had had happen in previous lives onto these men here. And the world that they created for this story was really good. I haven't gone too far into the whole afterlife system, probably farther than I should, but nowhere near as much as the book does. And it's really interesting, the whole what happens when you die, how that works out, what that means. All of that was really interesting. It was a lot of fun. It felt like a world that I wanted to play around in, that I'd want to see more stories in. And I'm really excited for the second book in the series to come out. Next book is going to be Shadow Empress by C.N. Crawford. This is the third book and the last book in the Night Elves trilogy. And it was a good conclusion to the trilogy. A lot of times in my reviews, I really enjoy the first book. My interest dwindles as the series goes on. What I like about the first book just doesn't carry forward throughout the whole series. And this series was really interesting for me because what I liked in the first book definitely doesn't carry forward in the other two books. And I'm glad, because what I enjoyed in that first book really only works in one book. And if it had continued in the second and third book, I'd have been pretty annoyed. The other thing is the second book was kind of a weird transitional book. We had to go from this almost like detective quest noir style feeling to something else. In this case, it was kind of like a Hunger Games style competition. And then from there, we had to go to saving the world and getting our two characters back together because they've sort of been on opposite sides of a war and trying to both figure out what's best for their people and best for the relationship as a whole. Anyways, I thought that the Shadow Empress really pulled it all together in a way that was just like a fun read. In this Night Elf trilogy, it brings a lot of Norse mythology to the mix. And I'm not very familiar with Norse mythology, so I can't say how accurate it was, but it was very refreshing. It was really a lot of fun to live in this mythological world, to live in a world that the Ragnarok had happened, humans were gone, the gods were dead, but there were still these magical objects and these myths that we could follow to help the remaining races survive. So overall, it was like a really fun romp. It was quick, and I thought that the relationship in it was adequate. It wasn't too much or too little. There was this one reoccurring theme. The first book has insta-love and like a fated mate situation. And our protagonist in the second book is really against this. She thinks that the magic is the only thing that makes them feel the way they feel, and that she wants to fall in love for realsies. So she breaks their fated mate bond or their connection. I had a lot of mixed thoughts on it because on one side, I get what she's saying. She wants choice and he should want choice too. But on the other side, they've been through a lot by the time she's finally able to break their insta-love situation. So you would think like their shared experiences would be enough anyways, and now she's just creating complications since the man doesn't want to break this bond. But I don't know. Also, like if I fell in love the traditional way, or if I was just magically in love, assuming that I was available and on the market, I wouldn't really care. In fact, something as simple as like magic keeping a connection together seems it doesn't seem like it would be fun to read, but it does seem like it would be really convenient in real life. So I was like, I don't know what this story is really saying. I guess it's saying that putting in the time and the work makes something more authentic and that you should strive for that, which I guess, considering there's not any magic here in the real world, is a fine message. But I didn't really understand why this character herself felt that way. It resolves itself in the third book, so I guess it's not a big deal long term. But it was just an interesting note I had for the whole series. And I do think in this case, Shadow Empress and the Night Elves trilogy is very consistent. There was fun, mythological stuff happening in all three books. There were a bunch of different stories going on. Because I wasn't familiar with the mythology, I was never 100% sure where they were going to go with it. And that was kind of a fun feeling. It's been a long time since I've been surprised by a book like that. And lastly, I want to jump into what I'm going to call my werewolf corner. I read so many werewolf shifter stories, it's stupid. And most of the time I don't like them. It's almost like a weird kind of punishment. I see a lot of potential in werewolf stories. I like the idea of like a pack family setup with a lot of different people. I like that large family, community, best friend feel. So I'm usually looking for that in my werewolf story. I also like the sense of loyalty that is implied through pack dynamics. I like the inherent setup that some packs might have alliances and some might be enemies. I like that a lot of times werewolves are working towards something. And I am accepting of a bunch of different pack structures. You can use the bad science pack structure with the alpha and the beta stuff, and I'm going to roll with it even though it's not scientifically relevant. Or you could use like a more modern take on pack structure that we understand today. And I think that's really interesting. I think I like the way that we explore social interactions and human interactions through a werewolf style. I also like the duality of personality you get in a lot of werewolf stories. I like that there's like a put together human, and then there's a part of you that's more connected to nature, or maybe a part of you that's more wild that you can't quite control. The part of me that likes transformations, like I loved the Animorph series because I liked the kids transforming into animals, and I liked the different takes on animal instincts and how humans would perceive that. All of that has potential for existence in werewolves too. So there's a lot of things about werewolf stories I like, but I find that overall, the werewolf genre on Kindle Unlimited is deeply underwhelming once you read it. The summaries are good, all of it is exciting, and I get into it and I'm like, oh, this isn't well written, or it just drags on. This quarter, I found 3 books that I feel are good diamond in the roughs in this werewolf genre. The first will be Alpha Hell, a dark rejected mate's romance by G. Baily. The first book is a very slow burn as far as the romance goes. In fact, there's almost no romantic tension going on. It's too early to tell. I can't decide if it's going to be a reverse harem or a love triangle situation, but it seems to be set up. There seems to be at least 3 men set up as potential romantic partners for a main character. Anyways, I liked this one because it combined a lot of different elements. For starters, there is these portal transports that take you across the human world and also take you into hell, or a different dimension they're calling hell. It doesn't seem like a traditional hell universe as we often think of, like the fire. And the other thing that's cool is, even though it says that it's a dark rejected mate's romance, I wouldn't personally categorize it that way. This mom is trying to escape hell to keep her daughter free and alive, and her husband sacrificed herself. In the pack of hell, he's the most powerful werewolf or whatever, and this is the largest, most dangerous pack, agrees to let her leave with her daughter if, when her daughter turns 18, he can take her as a mate. And the mom agrees to this because she doesn't see any way to survive otherwise, and she thinks like 18 years is a long time and I might be able to come up with something else by then. Which, of course, spoiler alert, she doesn't, and this pack guy comes when the girl is 18, that's our main protagonist, except when he gets there, he says he has the right to take her as a mate and then decides that she's too weak. and it looks like he might kill her, but the mom distracts him and the girl runs away. When this happens, she manages to escape in hell, and she thinks, I'll hide here in this large pack right under his nose. He won't even think to find me here. She finds one of her brother's friends, her half-brother's friends, and tells him she needs help, and they decide to go undercover in a demon hunting competition. And at this point in time, it becomes a little Hunger Gamesy, but not too much. They're not thrown together in an arena, more like they all pick up jobs and they get points for bringing in these demons that are dangerous and hurting people. So that's interesting because we get to look at a bunch of different kinds of demons and what they do. So there's a lot of like mythological elements there that I enjoy. And our main character gets to pick up a lot of skills. There is also a lot of fun side play. The people competing in this competition, they don't just want to win fair and square because they have the most points. They're willing to sabotage each other. And also, she doesn't really have a lot of experience with demon hunting or a lot of experience dealing with people trying to sabotage her. So there's this research innocence that she approaches with that slowly becomes more guarded and jaded. And it's fun to see character evolution like that too. And it's fun because the whole time there's this big bad alpha who sort of like makes everyone's life miserable, and she's kind of getting one over on him, which I enjoy. I like when the little guy sticks it to the man, and in this case, it helps that the alpha who's the man is just a jerk. So all of that's a lot of fun. It does end on a cliffhanger. Even though it's calling itself a romance, the first book has almost no romantic elements in it. There's like a development of a relationship that could be considered friendship, close friendship, between her and these three men, but it's not to the point where it has to be romantic. There's only one of the three of them where I see romance right now as an opportunity. And I don't know, we'll see in the next book, but it was a lot of fun. Like a lot of these werewolf books, there was a lot going on. But in this case, it came together as like a cohesive, fun, hopping journey instead of just like, this is too much craziness thrown at the wall on me. It was just like, okay, I'm going to keep rolling with this. This is going to be fun. I'm just going to accept this as a fun teen journey. I think this is probably a new adult flavored story, maybe young adult. I don't think so, even though the main character is 18. I think new adult is more appropriate. So the next book is going to be Shunned by Laurel. I'm actually in the middle of reading the sequel right now, but I don't think I'll finish it before March is over. The main character here, she could go into the kick-ass women category. There's this trope in werewolf stories where the men are super dominant and the women just kind of submit, and this story plays into that trope. Except, of course, our main character is a female who's also really dominant. And because of that, she is in danger of losing her place in the pack and not being able to find a spot in any of the other packs. And the world as we know it has kind of collapsed. There's like these wraith things that hang out that have destroyed all of humanity, and werewolves are trying to push them back and regain control of the world. So it's cool because there's some future tech like electric cars and solar chargers and saber like swords that have energy. All of that's kind of fun. And it's fun because it gives me the same vibes as when in Lord of the Rings, Éowyn like throws off her helmet and is like, I am no man, and then she kills the Nazgul. It's the same kind of feeling from that. This story is going to end up being a reverse harem, but we don't really see anything of that in the first book. I'm a little over halfway through the second book, and they've come to accept that there's going to be a reverse harem situation, but there's still no real action. And it's going to be a little bit of a strain based off of how this world is for them to ease into the reverse harem. But overall, I feel like the female character here is fully developed. She just happens to be really good at fighting, and it puts her in an odd position with all the men who are used to being the fighters, and the women are like gardeners or something. The one thing I will say about this story is that there are literally no other female characters in the story. So I don't know what the women are doing. I don't know if all the other women are happy with this setup and it's just her that's not cool with it. But it is fun. just to have a character there who's decided she's gonna kick ass and take names. And she does get an opportunity in the second book to beat every single one of the men. And that's satisfying. I'm glad they went all the way with that. And it wasn't a situation where she was set up to be able to beat them all and then doesn't for whatever reason. Overall, it's fun. It's campy. And it is very tropey. But I like those tropes and I'm enjoying the journey with it. And then the last story that is a werewolf shifter story that I've decided I liked is going to be King of Moonlight by Ava Chase, and it's the third book in the Bound to the Fae series. So I did not like the first in the Bound to the Fae series. I think I gave it I might have given it 3 stars, even though I felt like in my heart it was 2 stars. And the reason I would have done that is because I've given a couple books that were really bad 2 stars. And this book, the first book in this series, isn't really bad, so I didn't want to put it in the same category. The star system is not diverse enough. So sometimes I end up giving things 3 stars when personally they're 2 stars, or vice versa, just depending on what's going on. And in the first book, part of what I didn't like is hard to figure out what these people who turn into wolves are. She claims that they're fae, and in the first and the second book, there's no fae characteristics. It's all werewolf. And I was really annoyed. I was like, why are we calling these beings fae when they're werewolf? They don't have any fae characteristics. And the situation, except for the fact that they go from Earth to fairyland, just doesn't have any fairy. It has no reason to be set in the fairy realm or for these guys to be fae instead of werewolves. And that really annoyed me. Especially because I can think of 5 different workarounds so that you don't have to have a human world and a fairy world right off the top of my head. There's something just a little too much that I didn't enjoy happening. But I read the first book and I didn't have anything to read, so I read the second book when it came out. And the second book was better. They introduced another kind of fae that was associated with ravens in the second book, and I started to see why these beings were fae and not werewolves. And it helps too that there's a magic element that feels a little bit fae-like, with glamours and with in touch with nature, that's not quite witchy and isn't quite shifter. So I was like, all right, I can start to see why these men are fae instead of why fae that turn into animals, instead of why they're werewolves or shifters. The more we see of this world, the more I can understand why they're in a fairyland, and why there's a human world and a fairy world, and why it's important for there to be a modern human world, some kind of divide, and then this fairy realm. And also the idea that there's a heart of the fairy world resonates with a couple of different fae myths I've heard. So I started to be more into the fae and shifter aspect, even though they call their groups packs. So I would classify it both as a fae and a shifter novel. And the third book is when there starts to be enough intrigue and complication happening where I'm like, all right, this is a cool fairy story, but it's also like a werewolf story. And now I'm really enjoying the series. So this is one of those unusual series where I didn't like the first book, and I was sort of okay with the second book. And I'm really enjoying the third book, and I'm excited to get a fourth book. There looks like there's going to be at least 5 books in the series, so I'm about halfway through. I'm really enjoying the female lead and where we're going with her story. It's another reverse harem story, and of the men so far involved, I'm really only understand why she's in a relationship with one of them, but that's fine. A lot of times these reverse harems give very different personalities partially, so people have one romantic interest they're into. I think they work best when you understand why each of those romantic interests exists and where you can see appeal for each of them. But I think the primary goal is just a scattershot so that anyone who's reading has somebody they relate to. But yeah, Kings of Moonlight by Ava Chase, and all 3 of these books together are going to be my little werewolf corner. These are the 3 that were good, and you can not bother with the rest of the werewolf books I've read this quarter. So thanks for clicking on this video. These are 8 books out of 52 that I read this first quarter that I would recommend to other readers. I hope you guys got something new for your reading list. If you like this kind of video, go ahead and leave a thumbs up. And if you're looking for more content that's got a fantasy or sci-fi vibe, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I do book reviews and recommendations, and I also do story evaluating and alternate storyline kind of videos. You can go ahead and check out more on my page, and go ahead, leave me a comment. Tell me what your favorite book since January has been. Maybe tell me what else you're looking for content-wise. I'd love to hear more feedback. So thanks for getting to the end of this video. Bye!